Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Cloudy with a Chance of Insights, the bi-weekly podcast focusing on all aspects of the Microsoft Cloud, from Azure through to Dynamics. And yes, I do actually have a Dynamics story to cover off today. So, hey, congratulations to me. Joining me this week, as usual, is David and Cyrus, and they have a range of topics to discuss, going from the recent snafu around Front Door again this week that afflicted me. I was personally impacted by this one because I was in the middle of doing some work and suddenly I couldn't do anything. And I think some general security updates. And David has got a slightly more wide-ranging set of topics this week, I believe, including, and I'm trying to find my notes, because yes, occasionally I do make notes, includes a philosophical discussion around the death of the diagram, which I'll be interested to see, and cloud security theatre. So obviously we are leaning into the cloud security element this week. So I will be bucking my trend and not talking about security for a change. Now, as is my habit, I'm going to sort of start off with a slight tangent. And again, those watching on YouTube and I think listening on Spotify can actually just skip ahead and go to the chapters that will be shown down below to get the more interesting content from David and Cyrus. But I have a confession to make. I think on certainly a couple of the previous episodes of this, and I'll see if I can link them to put them up there. I've been a little bit nonplussed, I think is a good word, with Copilot. However, this week I have almost done a complete volte-face turnaround with my terrible French pronunciation. So Cyrus is probably banging his head on his desk at the moment. So again, this has come up in a couple of the conversations. So I've been working, and then this one is actually just on my own back, but we've got access to the private preview of Sentinel Graph, and we've had access to Sentinel Lake for a little while as well now. And what I thought would be interesting would be to just write a web interface that would allow me to start to query some of these things and to do some elements around that. And I thought, do you know what? I'm going to give Claude and GitHub Copilot a chance on this one and to see what they can do. Now, it decided to do it in React, which was interesting because I'm aware of React, but I've never actually done any development work in that. My previous experience was all sort of ASP.NET, C#, etc. So more traditional sort of web development tooling, I suppose. But over the course of, I reckon, about 3 hours of a bit of backwards and forwards and prompting, and I must admit some of the more technical bits I'd already done. So the app registration I'd already set up, that was all working. I'd already done, as I think some listeners will be aware, I'd already done like a test application that was able to connect and everything else. So I suppose some of that work had already been done. So the application itself didn't need to do it. But within the course of that 3 hours, I've basically had an application that was able to log in. It had a pre-baked suite of about 10 to 15 different queries across different tables. So from security to like Azure Monitor to just like policy alerts, all that sort of stuff. I was able to select all those predefined queries, run them. It would give me a list of results. I was able to click into an individual result. It would then show me the details and then any related incidents or results around some of the key topics that I'd decided. So if there was an alert saying, oh, someone has tried to use this particular exploit, it would then look in across all those other logs to see whether that same incident had occurred and bring it up to me in an instance. I told it to go and create a dashboard for me, and it's gone and create a dashboard, not only for the pre-canned queries, which it obviously knew what those pre-canned queries was going to return and what sort of data it's going to be, but I've also got a field on there that allows me to just enter custom KQL, and it's been able to dynamically create the graphs based off of the custom KQL. And this was just, as I said, this was basically 3 hours of me writing prompts, looking at the results, testing them, going back, okay, that's not quite right, or can we do this, and can we do X, Y, and Z? And the only thing I did in terms of opening up the code editor and writing some code was to change the banner image from a really sickly blue to a black.
Wow.
AI likes the blue. It's everywhere. You can see it.
Yeah, and that's all I did. Literally, it installed all the components I needed. So it did the node installation basically on its own. It did the GitHub integration on its own. I mean, obviously I had to prompt it, but yeah, I just did that. So it created the repo, did all the commits, all the pull requests, everything else it did basically on its own. All I did was have to sit there and, structure the prompts and then test the results. It did get a little stuck with trying to do the relationship queries. So, for example, if I then saw that alert type and I clicked on it and say, right, I want to now see any related alerts, it got stuck on that a little bit. And that was the longest piece that I had to work on. Because I suppose that is probably quite tricky in going from, say, KQL query and saying, right, I'm querying this table. I've got an entry that says this has happened. Go and look in other tables to try and find that entry, because table names will be different, column names will be different, possibly even data types might be different in some instances. So that was a little bit of a struggle. And Miha, our sort of a colleague, did suggest that I use something called sequential thinking MCP server to assist in that. Now, I don't know whether that helped or not, but certainly after I'd installed it, it suddenly we did sort of get somewhere with that particular piece. But that was really the only struggle that I had with the whole thing. So it's in a GitHub repo at the moment. It is a private repo until I sort of get to the bottom of it. But basically, I'm going to open this out. I'll probably do a blog post about it as well, and then I'll make it public and people can have a look. But in effect, all I've done is changed one hex code from blue to black in the whole thing. That's all I've done in terms of this application. So I am slowly changing my mind around Copilot. I mean, specifically GitHub Copilot, but I was incredibly impressed. It does open up a whole lot of questions about, and we have discussed this before, about how we get onto the development path, what a developer is going to be. Mm-hmm. I was probably saying in 2 or 3 years' time, but realistically, looking at some of this, it might be, what is a developer or an entry-level developer next year, let alone in 3 or 4 years' time?
I think I've seen various memes on this, and the entry level developer is a AI code fixer developer, right?
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it was very, very surprising at what it could do, and although I did still get a couple of compilation errors, which you really shouldn't get, I don't think. Personally, I don't think you should get a compilation error, especially if not for things like, oh, hang on a second, I haven't closed that tag off, for example, or something along those lines, which did happen on a couple of occasions. You sort of expect errors when you're actually running through it, which is fine. But basically, all I did was copy and paste the error message, say, wait, I got this. It went ahead and in most cases fixed it. So, yeah.
I can share the name offline because I don't want to do name dropping here. I don't know if they will agree, but I mean, we know, Dave, you did recently a dashboard in just few prompts that is actually reused today. But there's plenty of colleagues, especially one is a senior developer in IBM, and we keep talking about code, Python, the future, mainframe, etc. And now it says, actually, even me, I don't want to learn any more code. I'm useless. Look, he showed me all the AI tool he used, Copilot, GitHub Copilot, but there's also another one. I said, look, I just put process. I say what I want. I connect them to different connectors, MCP, and everything is done. I don't even have I can launch my main prompt and it's going to process for 2 hours. Whatever it's going to give me is going to work. I know, because it's tested. So it's not only junior developers. I think it's development as a field will change completely, like doctors.
Yeah. So God knows where that's going to leave us in a few years' time. Anyway, on that depressing note, and as this topic is probably quite fresh in our minds, and it was actually one of the things I was going to do a sort of a ramble on as well, but Cyrus has sort of said, I want this to talk about this particular topic, so I will pass it across to Cyrus and talk, so he can talk and hopefully educate us a little bit about the Azure Front Door issue that happened again, although I know it's a different root cause, earlier on in the week that certainly caused me a bit of pain on Wednesday. Over to you, Cyrus.
Thank you. So you said that we should fast forward your bit, but if anyone comes here, just go back into the richest part. It's really interesting. Don't fast forward it. So I will start with a small history. I'll go fast because I know, David, you have to go, and so I don't want to take too much of the time. Sometimes when we have an issue and times pass and we forget the emotions around it, but we remember the fact. Like it can be like a human issue, problem with someone when we're young, or an issue with something. One of the issues that I still remember the emotions after more than 25 years is when I first time upgraded my Windows XP to Vista, which I hated Vista. And everyone told me don't do it, and I did it because I wanted the last version of everything. And I had 3 licenses part of my school. And I remember that I was so excited by having the new system that I lost a lot of data. So I learned how to go back. But this feeling of being powerless and being stupid, like you make a decision at some time and then you face your error and then you don't know what to do because you don't have control. You have to learn how to undelete data. It's not possible all the time. So this is how I started to be interested by security. Resilience was the term, but I couldn't put words on it. So the security is to protect and make sure that this doesn't happen at scale. What you said, you were impacted, Richard, but I was impacted too because I think everyone was impacted somehow. We were lucky because for England, France, it was a bit late into the normal 9 to 5, but in the US, it was the morning. So all these small companies, all these businesses that say, okay, we have password protection, or we have the portal, whatever worst case scenario, break glass account and stuff. All of that become useless. So you remember, David, in the WhatsApp message we exchanged with all the team, we said, oh, what's the issue? And I said something weird, which was not true. I said, oh, also the VMs are impacted. So if you, like me, manage family websites or anything that you have on VMs, old school way, and not only the website doesn't work if it's behind a front door, because front door it's just £35, €35. You use it to protect from DDoS or from to other layer of security or CDNs. Everything behind the front door was blocked. So it was not just like a global incident somewhere and you have to wait. It was impacting physically airports, e-commerce websites like Costco, etc. But me as an individual, why do this analogy is when I try to connect to the portal, the message, I still have the screenshot. The message I had was, your account does not have access to these resources, which meant that I was hacked. So I had tears of my eye. I was like, okay, it's good for me. I learned my lesson. I keep talking about security, but I got hacked and I have to learn my lesson. And I was like, no, it's not possible. It's a shame. And so self-shaming, all these feelings come to your mind. Normally, I keep my cool. Like it's an issue. You have the pleasure to fix issues, and I know David know me a bit, so I face difficult challenge sometimes. And David is a master in troubleshooting, and I always jump on him if I have any of these issues. But that was clearly something like I didn't expect to see. So my account was blocked. Intune, no access to anything. I tried to see what happened, and I started to breathe, to say, okay, that's a global issue. That's not me. So weirdly enough, I was happy to see it was a global issue, selfishly to say, okay, that's out of my control, and now someone else is taking care of it. Me, what I have to do is to check that. So, but passing that, and I posted something very negative online, and that's why I wanted to talk about this. Now, I didn't want to just say AWS, Microsoft, they lay off so many competent people, and now we face more and more these issues. I wanted to do a parallel to that. I don't know if it's fair, but that was my first gut feeling. And the second gut feeling proved to be right. There is a tool called Icedoru or something like that. I'll give you the link. And this is a DDoS as a service. and this can project 20 to 22 terabytes per second of like really, really toxic SYN, like UDP, TCP message. I can break legitimately those cloud providers. So I still don't know what's the real root cause behind the issue. So Richard, sorry if I can't educate you guys on this. Maybe you know more than me about the root cause. My work for these 2 days was really to check what we can do to prevent that. Because I remember when I talk to clients now, we like, you give the best practice, and you normally there is always at a point a smile. They smile at you and say, "Okay, this is a consultant. Obviously, you have to tell me that, but this is unrealistic issue." For example, but something that came back to us multiple times recently was since the Trump election, and I don't want to be political here. I don't judge, but since I noticed that clients in the public sector and different countries, actually, I can see the public notes, that they consider vendor locking more often as a threat, especially from the US dependencies because of tariff, etc. So I was surprised to see even the UK mentioning that as a line in a spreadsheet to say this is a thing that we consider, that we can lose access to whatever cloud provider. And I just to digress one more time, Tim Callahan, the Microsoft practice leader, one day commented on one of my posts and said, what about, I was like, oh, security portal from Microsoft is excellent, there's this news. And he said something about, what about resilience? And I smiled at the comment the same way clients smile at us, when we give this kind of advice. And I was looking and said, that's actually an interesting thought. So we should have thought leadership always. We should not just be passionate about something and then say the technology can solve everything, but always think out of the box. And this was a cool reminder for all of us what happened, because I felt stupid again. I was like, if I was a global company and I give the advice, go to the cloud, and we talked. Funny enough, we talked to the last episode. I was saying that it's really good that now Entra is a single source of truth, but I should not have said that. It should be co-managed. It should be the primary one, but we should always, despite the weakness, have a secondary one in everything. And that's what. Sorry, there's an echo again and the sound. So I started to do that, to say, okay, we always, I checked online, I did prompting, I tried to do my homework. At one point, I smiled. There was a line that says, you should seek expert guidance. And this gave me cold sweat, because we are the experts that provide guidance. And I was like, I don't feel now I have the brain muscle about all of this. So I started to look, and we are in the best position, us as Microsoft practice in IBM, because we talk about hybrid cloud all the time. We talk about a multi-cloud, hybrid, etc. So I don't read my notes now, because I wanted really to give all the thoughts really, really quick. There's a list I have. I can probably share that into a notes instead of just going through them, but I can quickly give what's the best practice today and state of the art. Things that seems obvious, but others seems more interesting to me personally. We talk about diversify and distribute. So avoid putting all the eggs into one basket. So you have to identify what's the most important workloads and have a backup. Hybrid cloud readiness. So you identify multi-clouds and also on-prem, because this is definitely more important. But again, we talk about jobs and AI and these kind of things. But if you push to a standard of you need on-prem, you need the backup. If a law pass, a resilience law, I don't know, European Union is strong at creating laws on this kind of standard. If that pass one day, it will impose a lot of companies to bring back the expertise that left to the cloud. So you will need, again, expertise because I see memes, I see jokes online of, I saw Windows Server 2003 and during the crisis, and people said, okay, I'm turning that back on, and people laugh because it's true and not true. You can't go back in time. You can't go back into a full on-prem. It's unrealistic, and you will be alone to defend yourself. It's not the solution. So it's always hybrid, but how? But we can't answer that into one 10 minutes conversation here. But there's architecture. There's things ready. For example, work in degraded mode. So always have a plan B and process what your admin can do. So one thing that made me smile again is some jobs I personally forget about their existence. On one of them is, for example, chaos engineers, chaos architect. And that name is funny because imagine you're on date and someone says, "Oh, I'm a lawyer. And what about you?" "Oh, I'm a chaos architect. I like chaos and I think about nuclear strike or I think about tornadoes." Or it's a weird job, but it's becoming more and more important about how to create chaos or anticipate chaos about things that people smile at. This thing I said, you smile at one line in a spreadsheet, and that's unrealistic. But it happens more and more often for whatever reason it happens. And we will probably not know what's behind the scenes, so that's always best to think. So practically speaking, in my domain, so endpoint manager or Azure or security in general, because I've lost access to those portals, it gives me cold sweat. And this brings back the subject of how you navigate into the dark, because that's the thing. So if we talk about endpoint manager, Intune, the short answer is co-managed. You find a different unified endpoint management. For example, it could be a competitors of Intune, or you go back on-prem again. I like that solution, SCCM. Microsoft should invest more in that. Like you have a co-management system in case you navigate in the dark. And Intune, what it does is just like pushing some native scripts on Windows, or you just need this alternative system to manage that. The other one is, we talked often about this one, is Azure Arc, and David can agree on that. I'm sure like there's so many things today we can do, and Azure Arc is basically here to navigate into the dark. It's literally the blueprint of Azure Arc. And we talk about Azure Local. So this is the technology, but there's also process that I can share in the description that I actually find that you have a way to think about your business continuity plan, and chaos engineers, chaos architects help you to just find a gap into those to avoid the situation. For example, Azure Front Door, you use it. There was a point they were saying that now we identify Azure Front Door, use Traffic Manager or anything DNS, anything BCP you have on-prem if you have your server. So the solution for me, for us that work in IBM, there's a lot of internal architecture that I started to, engrave. I shouldn't say grave, but we uncover and get interested in. And I will finish with that because I can't talk too much. It's the all this Red Hat OpenShift, all these Red Hat on Z17 from the IBM servers. We are lucky to be in this position of having one of the best material in the world, one of the best hardwares, and the knowledge on different clouds. And the next subject, Richard, I will not talk about that today. I will do that next time.
Okay, no problem, Cyrus. What I found weird, and this is because it was Azure Front Door, but I was obviously having problems logging in. But when I went into the Azure portal, all I could see was the resource groups. But I couldn't see anything inside the resource groups. It was very weird because I don't, in my head anyway, correlate that with Azure Front Door, but perhaps I should go and look at the architecture a bit more and see what was going on with that. But it was very odd. But I mean, all clouds go down. I wrote a post about this last week when the AWS East one went down, and then Microsoft had another Azure Front Door issue, this time caused by a Kubernetes failure. But yeah, I don't even know what the real solution to that is. Yes, you can talk hybrid. Yes, you can talk, cloud resiliency, having workloads on Azure, GCP, AWS, even IBM Cloud. But that becomes complex, becomes expensive. And in theory, you're probably adding too much complexity, which means that you're probably at a bigger risk of actually things going completely wrong as you go through. And a lot of organizations, even the compliant ones that have some sort of compliance control, so government, defense, banking, whatever it might well be, probably can't afford to actually implement that belt and braces approach anyway, because it becomes hugely expensive, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think you look at the availability metrics for something like Front Door, and they're probably still within 99.9999, maybe still, even with that outage. And you think of the cost that's associated with trying to do that yourselves, right, with your own infrastructure and everything else. It does get really expensive really quick, and it's an age-old debate, isn't it, around risk versus cost.
And I must admit that the SLA came up in my head earlier on in the week, because if you look at 99.99% or 5 nines, that still equates to a reasonable portion of time. I don't know what the actual numbers are, Dave. I suspect you probably do. And you look at it and go, okay, if I amortize that or spread that across the whole year, that's nothing. That's like a couple of minutes here and a couple of minutes somewhere else. But obviously, it never works like that, does it? It's always that big thing in one big lump, which means that you're down for 8 hours or whatever it might well be. So I don't know. It's a funny one. Yeah. Anyway, we go from that to diagrams, I think, David.
Diagrams.
Or the death of diagrams.
Death of diagrams. Yeah. Are we? And sorry, everyone, it's a bit more of a philosophical conversation rather than new tech updates, because I just want to wait and see what comes from Ignite. So I'm not being lazy, honest. But anyway, are we seeing the death of the diagram? It's funny because I would say we've never had more diagrams. And I guess to the conversation that we were just talking about now, right? Somehow we sort of understand less. And I think there was a time, God, I sound old when I say this, I don't mean it this way, but there was a time when drawing a system architecture sort of really meant something. You'd sit in a room with a few people, and I guess, you'd whiteboard, you'd talk it through, you'd have arguments about what connects to what, where the data goes, what the security around it is. You'd have really good, robust conversations. And the act of the drawing was the actual thinking process, right? And now diagrams just sort of magically appear, right? They're fully formed. AI's generated them. They look beautiful. They look gorgeous. Everything's aligned. Everything's straight. That's one of my bugbears, by the way. But anyway, all the logos in the place. But half the time it feels like now nobody can actually explain what the thing does and the rationale that sits behind it. So it's all surface and no substance. And I think, we've fallen into this, and I say we, collectively, it feels like we've fallen into a bit of a trap, because these tools can draw the boxes and the arrows and, whatever else. And we think the job is done. And I see this a lot at the moment. But for me, the value of the diagram was never the picture itself. It was the conversation that produced it in the first place. So, that one little arrow between two components that you see on these diagrams, well, what is it? Is it a data flow? Is it authentication? Is it an API call? Is it a hybrid call across tenants? It's really, really not clear. And the people who are drawing these things don't know, right? They can't explain it. And I think the reason I use the title is drawing, diagrams as we knew it, dying. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And I don't know, because if we're moving towards architecture as code, that's good, right? So I think, if you've got something like a bicep file that tells you exactly what exists, and then you have, I don't know, a dashboard that says what's happening. Do you see what I'm saying? I think is transitioning. So the skill isn't. It's not really about drawing the pretty boxes. It's about being able to tell the story around how those boxes behave, connect, and evolve, right? So, how it was just on my mind. I want to talk about it. I'm going to stop now because I'm going to start rambling.
I think it's an interesting question, and I go back to when I was working for a company called Content and Code at the time. They're now called Advania, I think, and we actually had little offices. I mean, Cyrus, you were an ex-Content and Code person as well, so I don't know whether you were in the Fountain House. Was it Fountain House?
I was in Reading.
Offices.
No,
you were in Reading. Yeah. So they actually had offices there with big glass walls, as is common in most offices. But we used to write on those walls and draw diagrams. So we would sit in a room, and instead of having a little tiny whiteboard, we basically had the whole the whole glass wall to do. But anyway, I digressed a little bit on that bit. But what I used to do, and this was when we were sort of doing a little bit of like agile design thinking type sort of design, is we would take pictures of those diagrams that we draw on the window or on the whiteboard or wherever it was, and that would actually form part of the design documentation. So we weren't going into Visio and doing it all nice and prettily. No, we were just taking a picture of what we'd done. We'd stick it in the design document. We might then drill down into it a little bit more in Visio or some other tool. But then that sort of gave us the benefit of what you were saying, David, about the sort of, the free flow of ideas. People saying, well, actually, no, that's not going to quite work because you need to do X, Y, and Z, or you haven't thought about this prereq or this limitation, whatever it might well be. And I actually really quite enjoyed that. And I did that a couple of times at IBM when I joined IBM. And I got frowned at because obviously that's not it's not a component model, for example, or it's not a logical or architecture. So that was interesting. But I do see what you mean, that there is some content I've seen relatively recently, which is supposed to be reference architecture. And I look at it and I go, A, that's not reference architecture, but B, that diagram doesn't actually even really tell me anything. Because as you're right, there's a line connecting box A to box B. What is that line? Does it just mean that they're related in some way? Is it a connectivity piece? Is it a web call? Is it an API call? Is it a data transfer? Whatever it might well be, you need to be able to understand what those are. And it comes back, I think, to the conversation we've had a few times on this pod around critical thinking. You can get AI to do all this marvelous stuff, and I was praising it earlier on in the podcast for doing everything else. But you have to understand what it's doing and what the implications are of the output. And this is not necessarily just about going, it's giving me a link to an article. Do I need to make sure that link is valid and it's not made something up in the piece? But it's actually about understanding what it's doing. And if we just leave it to the AI tools, we are going to end up in a mess somewhere. It's almost inevitable that there will be some big snafu around that. What was it? Was it Deloitte? I probably just slandered somebody, so I better be careful. But I'm pretty sure it was Deloitte in Australia. They were commissioned by a local government organisation to do some sort of report on housing. And they'd used AI to generate the report. They charged this Australian, entity $250,000, I think it was, for anyway, whatever it was, but a reasonable amount to produce this report. And it was generated by AI and it had multiple errors in it. I'll find the link to the article so I don't get sued and put it down below. And if it wasn't Deloitte, I do apologise, but I'm almost certain it was. But that's just a really good example of just, great, use these tools, make use of them because they do help. But make sure you understand what the outputs are and how that fits into whatever it is that you're trying to do, whether that's an architecture, whether that's a report, whether it's, podcast, feeds. Because I'm now starting to use, shouldn't say this live, but I'm starting to use Copilot to do the summaries for Twitter and LinkedIn, for example. But I have to validate what it's saying. And I quite often rewrite the output, but at least it gives me that starting point.
So to add to what David said, I saw myself adding a step into my exchange with people is when I ask for diagrams for different projects. Now I always double check if it's created by AI. And if I have a feeling it's created by AI, I have lose time to challenge the thought process on how you created that. And if I have like, oh, I don't know, I get upset because I'm like, you send something to me just to tick a box. And that's exactly what David said. It's very critical that we are our own enemy because whoever put that in place, you need this, you need that as a procedural thing. We industrialize the creation of those diagrams just to fill a tick box. But what you said, David, and what you said also, Richard, about the creation process, that you need to go through the challenging ideas, drawing on the board, or during COVID, I remember we used a whiteboard from Microsoft. I used to love that. You can share the screen, you can do drawing. No, you're wrong. And then are you talking about network diagram? Are you talking about functional diagram? And so this is the game, and now it's replaced by tick box. I have the diagram. We don't have time. Let's send it to the client. So yeah, it's a very important conversation to have. And unfortunately, we end up wasting time just to challenge back. What do you mean by this diagram?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, that always used to happen. I don't know. I mean, because when you're doing like certainly if you're doing a proper formal review of a design document, you would always get backwards and forwards saying, "What do you mean by this? That diagram doesn't make a lot of sense." But at least somebody had actually, in theory, put some thought behind it to say, "Look, this is what's going on in my head. And I'm going to try and represent that in the diagram." It might be wrong, but it's down there. So, I mean, probably just to underline that, I honestly hope it's not the death of the diagram, because in my head, pointing at his chest, the diagram is probably the easiest way to show a complex idea to perhaps people that aren't technical, as well as to the technical communities. So I do really like a good diagram that tells a story, but also gives enough technical information so you can pass it off to either, I don't know, developers, ops teams, architects, whatever it might well be, that gives sufficient level of information in an easy digestible way that says, okay, right, you got component A, it talks to component B over these ports using this protocol, and we're expecting X, Y, and Z to happen, whatever it might well be. And you can do that quite easily in a diagram. Otherwise, it's just a massive table, and then no one can understand or read those, quite frankly.
Yeah. No, I agree. And anyone can read a story, but if you've crafted and it's your story, then you tell that story much better, don't you? So
I don't know if anybody else saw this, but that did remind me of a post by Richard Jones, an ex-colleague of both mine and David's on LinkedIn. So I don't know whether you saw that one, David. He was talking about how to do a sort of a drawing of what LLMs and AI is sort of doing. He ended up with some weird Venn diagram type thing. So I'll put a link to that in the post as well for anybody who's interested. But it also sort of brought me back to another point, which I just completely derailed myself by talking about Richard Jones. So I'm going to ignore that. And if I do remember it, I'm going to come back to it and interject that into the piece. The second bit you want to talk about was security, David, but I don't know whether
and it's
sort of
kind
covered
of
that in the.
Yeah, it's a very. It's an adjunct conversation to what we were just talking about, right? Because, when you talk to people and you look at these pictures, you say, is it secure? They go, yes, we're using zero trust and we're using secure channels and we're doing this and we're doing that. They've got lots of compliance badges everywhere. And then you actually go into the environment and let's say you open up a block container and, oh, look, it's got public access turned on. And it feels in the industry, and I'm generalizing, that there's a lot of that security theatre that's going on at the moment, and I get it. It looks good in reports, looks good in meetings, dashboards are green, all that sort of stuff. But we still see the basics sort of slipping through. And it's not that people don't care. I think part of it is they've started believing that the tools are going to look after it for them, right? And it's the same conversation we're having, as everyone in security says, trust but verify, which is fine if you're a security person. I still think some of the people that are pulling together some of these solutions haven't really mentally acknowledged what that really means. And, it's becoming, as our AI world evolves, security is becoming a bit more abstract, because we know it's not about locking the door before you go out. Half the problem is knowing where the bloody doors are, right? And people, certainly from an Azure perspective, people see, things like trusted Azure services. And it just assumes it means, okay, any Microsoft thing can talk to any other Microsoft thing safely. They front sensitive resources behind front door or WAF because, well, it's Microsoft, so it sort of feels secure, right? They don't actually check what it means. And that illusion of safety is, I guess, one misstep away from a bit of a disaster. So, it's not more... A lot of it is culture, but I think it's about people really embodying what that actually means and then doing it, right? And again, with the dependence on the AI tools, they're not. So I just, another philosophical debate. Go on, go.
Again, I'm worried that you're right with this, and the reason why I'm saying this is that I'm in my head now. I'm saying, right, I can't say that because that's probably going to get me into trouble. And I can't say that because that might get me into trouble. So, client engagement a few years ago for a client in the defense industry. I think it's fair to say that part without getting myself into too much trouble. They had brought a package solution, a SaaS solution, off a major vendor. I won't say whom or what. And it was sold to them in a way that made them believe that they didn't have to worry about security. That all the security was behind the, in the black box, everything was secure, you didn't need to worry about it. But what they sort of failed to mention is that had to be integrated with on-premises systems. So how can security all be done from that side? You're basically going from a secure on-prem environment to a SaaS environment over the public internet. And yes, you can do a few things to, help solve that, VPNs, but they were still having to authenticate. So authentication flows were going from on-prem to the cloud. They were having to worry about, can people download stuff? Can they email stuff from their system? Can they do it? So security wasn't all handled in the black box. Now, whether it was the account person from this organization that was, buttering them up a little bit by just saying, I want to sell, so I'm just not going to, raise some of these things that you need to think about, or whether it was the client that was just sitting there going, oh, yeah, this is great. We can just pay the money, and they weren't asking too many questions. Because only when we came to deploy it, or that they came to deploy it, I should say, that was like, well, actually, hang on a second. We need to do X, Y, and Z. But it's included. No, it's not included. You need to think about these things. I mean, one of the things is they wanted to authenticate using Kerberos. Don't ask me, but they had to authenticate using Kerberos, and that's not a standard web SaaS authentication flow.
No.
If
And
I
I
can,
should clarify, although it was being sold as a SaaS platform, it wasn't really a SaaS platform. It was more like a PaaS or on-prem platform sold as a SaaS platform. So you could do this, but they hadn't gone through that topic.
sorry, the subject, if I can just 1 minute 30, I'll do it fast. I said I'm not going to discuss about that, but what Dave again said triggered many conversation, many issue I had about one word, is the word security expert. And there's this person that I followed since a few months, and actually I discovered that this person worked at Microsoft, is the director of the business development for government, and he used to work 11 years at IBM. He's called Alan Biloworsky. Sorry if I pronounce the name badly. He wrote something short that I really, really loved, because it was comparing to a previous engagement I had, and David knows about it. And to jump on what you both said, I really just read because it makes perfectly sense. And it's not a one-person problem, security, one person to check. It's a complete field. That's why in IBM we have CSS separated. He said, recently a CEO told me about a meeting with a security expert, and a quote, who claimed to know it all. I smiled and said, there's no such thing as a security expert. Why? Because to call someone security expert is like calling someone a science expert. You might master a field, but never the whole terrain. Sorry, that's my French word, terrain. The average enterprise ends up with 40 security tools from over 20 vendors, and there are 481 cybersecurity domains certification listed as of today. And this comes from Paul Jeremy. He made the security certification roadmap, but he's keep updated. It's the best one today. It's the most holistic one. So I will send the link, Richard. You should honestly put it. I know it's more work for you, but it's like a big slide with all. There's all the Microsoft certification and security also on that one. So it is IC Square. Sorry, I digress. And he said the Dunning-Kruger effect is alive and well in cybersecurity. The less you know, the more you think you mastered it. So true professionals know the lane, they collaborate, specialize, and stay humble, because the moment you believe you figured out a security is the moment you start falling behind. And that I've seen it multiple times, David. Like you're the security guy, you're responsible of everything. And even if you have the best intention in the world, at one point you will rely on tools. At one point say, I'm not a machine, and you will end up doing mistakes, because there's, for the subjects you said, Richard, you should have an IAM expert, different SOC expert, whatever expert that is required. And it's expensive, but that's what it is. Because it's like doctors, and you have like dentists, and you have like the ophthalmologist, or like they're doctors, but they don't touch the same thing, and they will do a mess if they start to switch lanes. I mean, that's my strong opinion.
Perfect. And I think you're absolutely right with that one, Cyrus. Right, I am very much conscious of time, but I did start this episode by saying that I had some Dynamics news that I wanted to cover off. So I am going to do an incredible speed run through the 3 topics that I'd picked to talk about for this week. And I think I can do this. I'm fairly practiced at going very, very fast and skipping over probably all the important details of what we're talking about. So anyway, here we go. So story 1, Azure Storage Mover. I came across this on one of my feeds the other day, and it is something that I think it would have been really useful to have earlier on in my career. But at a very sort of 50,000 foot level, it will help you move storage stuff from AWS into Azure. So no requirement for external toolings, no scripting required, nothing. Just basically, in effect, that's the source, that's the destination. You go ahead and move the stuff. So there you go. That's Azure Storage Mover. And that was what, 20 seconds? I don't know.
Wow.
Next one is Copilot App Builder and Workflows. So I can't remember whether I did this subject on one where we were all together or where I actually covered this off in the episode I did on my own. But I had a problem about 3 or 4 months ago where I was trying to get Copilot to do something that was a little bit more flowy. So go here, do this, go here, and then do something else afterwards. And it was around task management. So I wanted to be able to go into a thing and say, go and create a task in Planner, update the task, whatever it might be. But Copilot Studio and Copilot itself at the time wasn't able to do that. It was able to tell me how I can do it, but it wasn't able to do it itself. So anyway, so App Builder and Workflows appears to be a solution for that. So you can go in and create an app that will do multi-stage workflows, potentially in a sort of a more agentic manner. But I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. That is on my list of things to look at. Tangentially to that, and I hadn't come across this before, and I'll put the link into the show notes, is that I actually found a roadmap for Copilot, which I hadn't seen before. So there is a public roadmap for Copilot development, which I found interesting because I'd assumed it was probably in the sort of larger M365 roadmap, which again, I will put a link in if anybody doesn't know about it. But I'd imagine by now, everybody should know about the M365 roadmap website. And if you're not following it on RSS feed, then shame on you, because you should be. Anyway, that's that one. And then finally, and we will end on the Dynamics news. And unfortunately, this is actually a security story. So we are very much leaning into the security piece today, is that within a Dynamics 365 contact center, which we actually do quite a lot of work with internally at IBM, there is now a voice AI and data redaction functionality. So you can look at potentially redaction of sensitive data in the voice sort of interactions that are going on within that system, which I think is a really interesting development and feature that's coming through from that, because it is quite a big area, especially when we're doing a lot more sort of voice chat interactions with people. So the ability to actually be able to redact sensitive information from that, I think is going to be really, really important. Anyway, links to all those 3 stories will be in the show notes, along with links from Cyrus and David. If you've managed to get to the end of this episode, then please do subscribe, follow, leave a comment, have your thought, share your thoughts about diagrams with us. I think that's a very emotive, especially for architects. I think that is a very emotive piece. Which that's now reminded me of what the topic was. John Saville did a piece like 5 things for a good architect or something. I don't know whether any of you guys saw it.
No,
I haven't actually watched it yet. So I will probably have to do a apology next week. But I hope that one of those 5 things is the ability to take complex issues and get them into a state that is simple for other people to understand. Because I personally think, as an architect, that is one of the biggest things that we have to do, is take complex systems architectures or flows or whatever it might all be, and basically get them to be understood by, people in the business who might not necessarily be technical. But anyway, that was what I was going to talk about 20 minutes ago. So weird brain. But anyway, it just leaves me time to say thank you very much for watching. Do remember to do the subscribe, like, and follow things, and please drop us a comment if you feel like it. And again, thank you for David and Cyrus for joining me on a Friday morning. And we will see you in 2 weeks' time.